Okay. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you had a lovely weekend, and we appreciate you joining us. Today's a Monday, and it's always kind of difficult right after a weekend to have you join and work additional hours today. But we are very happy to have some of our colleagues from the U.S. Agency for International Development joining us today to talk really about the work that they do across the globe, how they change people's lives in a very positive manner, and the manner in how they go about doing so. My name is Eureka Huggins. I'm the director for the Payne Fellowship Program, the Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program. My colleague Nye is here joining us, and some of our other colleagues hopefully will be joining us soon. Before we begin, I just wanted to take just about 2 minutes to tell you a little bit more about the Payne Fellowship Program. So the Donald Payne International Development Fellowship Program, it is a graduate fellowship program named in honor of the great Congressman Donald M. Payne Sr. He was the first African American congressman from the state of New Jersey. Congressman Payne was a true humanitarian at heart. He cared not only about individuals in his state and in America, but he really cared about the life of human beings all across this world. And he showed that through his work. And so it's an honor for us here at Howard University to be administering this particular fellowship. It is sponsored by the U.S. Agency for International Development and administered by us at Howard University. As I mentioned before, it is a graduate fellowship program. It is a career pathway to the USAID Foreign Service. It's a very unique pathway to the USAID Foreign Service. USAID Foreign Service officers work on the front line of really some of the world's most pressing issues, whether it's hunger, whether it's humanitarian assistance, climate change, economic development, you name the issues, USAID is at the forefront in international development. And my colleagues will tell you a little bit more about that. So the fellowship, the main goal of the fellowship is really to attract outstanding individuals who have been historically underrepresented in the Foreign Service, so that there is a full representation of all of America. Not everybody up and down the East Coast, but all in Middle America, North, South, East, West, are fully represented in many different areas of diversity. The fellowship pays up to $104,000 for 2 years of graduate school. And the graduate school program is a program that will support your career in a particular backstop or career pathway for USAID. So $25,000 go towards $24,000 goes towards your academic program each year. An $18,000 stipend goes towards, hopefully your books, your rent, however you choose to use that. And then each year during the summer, up to $10,000 for a summer professional development opportunity, whether it's in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, or the second year whether it's overseas at a USAID mission, working with Foreign Service officers to see exactly how much work they do in the missions and within the U.S. Embassy. So with that in mind, it is such an honor to have two of our colleagues from USAID who took time from their really busy schedule to be with us today. We have Andrew Nielsen, who is a Foreign Service officer, a senior economist with the Office of Chief Economist at USAID, and also Scott Cameron, who is a senior technical group advisor with the Bureau of Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. And welcome, Andrew and Scott, and I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you have quite a lot to cover. So welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So I will speak about the Economist backstop. I'll turn it over to Scott to talk about the other backstops. And our endeavor here is also to leave plenty of time for questions. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking for myself, my remarks will be insufficient to really cover the backstop. I'll do my best, but really want this to be informal and a good engagement with everybody here.
And Andrew, one thing before you start, tell us a little bit about yourself, please, you and Scott, and let us know what inspired you to be at USAID.
Sure. So I'm an economist. I studied economics and a bunch, and I kind of kept coming back to but what does this mean? what does this matter? Really kind of got hit by the development bug and wanted to be involved as opposed to writing interesting papers about development from a theoretical perspective. And so I wanted to get my hands dirty, be involved in USAID, and really see how I could apply my skills to what's some of the most pressing problems on the planet. So I've had tours. I've been in USAID for 14 years, been in Washington now 3. Before that, I spent 10 years abroad, combined in South Africa, Nepal, and Kenya.
Excellent.
Great.
And Scott, you're going to tell us, and then you also tell us a little bit about USAID and how USAID differs from State Department.
Sure, of course, happy to do so. And good evening, everyone. Really happy to be here. It's a pleasure to talk to such a accomplished group. So yes, my name's Scott Cameron. I've been in the Foreign Service for 17 years. I am in the Senior Foreign Service. I've served most of my career overseas in the Philippines, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Kenya, and now I've been spending the last several years in Washington in various roles. Um, I think for me, I graduated from undergrad shortly before September 11th, and I was actually traveling the world. I was in the United Kingdom on my way to Nairobi, Kenya, when September 11th happened, and is coupled with just this realization of, hey, maybe people across the world have different opinions and perspectives, and then coupled with landing in Nairobi and going to Mombasa along the coast and just seeing a level of poverty I'd never experienced before in my life. I'd been to Mexico, I'd been to Europe, but really nothing that I saw there. And it really kind of for the first time, helped me realize what I wanted to do, what my path in life was meant to do. And after I, returned to the United States, I went to grad school and very much studied international development, economics, and joined the agency in 2008, where I was really focusing on private enterprise and economic issues. In terms of the USAID and the broad scope of what we do, I mean, across the broader national security apparatus, there's a range of uh, government agencies and departments: State Department, Department of Defense, USAID, Department of Commerce, Millennium Challenge Corporation, and a host of other government agencies that do government business overseas and employ our foreign policy. So USAID, we're one of the 3 Ds from defense, diplomacy, and development. And really, we're part of the government which works with other countries, governments, local organizations, stakeholders, and tries to build the capacity of countries across a range of technical areas, some of which we'll be talking about tonight. So we try to help improve healthcare systems, education systems, economic policies, environment, build better engineering practices, and all these different technical areas where we work with local actors and governments in hope of trying to put ourselves out of a job, frankly. Give them the skills, give them the training, give them the exposure and some of the resources to hopefully do it one day without us. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do is, put a lot of these countries on a path to self-reliance. But in terms of how we differ from the State Department, they're the diplomacy part of the 3 Ds, which in that case, everywhere you go, there's an embassy, and we're part of the broader, chief of mission presence at post. And the State Department really works on international policy, working and engaging with governments, and we're kind of with them hand in hand. We're related, but again, we have a lot of programming. We're primarily a contracting organization where across all the different technical areas I already mentioned, we really put those programs in place alongside our State Department colleagues who are really working on more of the policy side and us on the development.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'll turn it back to you, Andrew. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. So for economists, I'll just make a few little points here. People who come into the agency as economists are expected to be generalists, right? There's a lot of different things you can specialize in. People who come in, we have a required academic requirement of a master's or higher in economics, or at least 1 year of higher level econ. Really, we need people who understand macro, micro, statistics and econometrics, plus individual fields, right? People who understand development and application of development, as well as, program design and management, statistical or strategic econ planning. What an economist does from one field or one assignment to another changes every time, right? In one case, you might be supporting programs on energy, another time's on environment, another time on agriculture. So the function of the economist changes, and the skill set and at least specific skill areas change, mission to mission, post to post, sometimes even day to day. And so we work with our state colleagues quite closely. We also work with other donors and host governments on all things economic. So the economists are sort of the main counterparts to some of the bigger players like the World Bank, the IMF, sometimes other donors, the regional banks like the Asian Development Bank, AFDB, etc., um, to provide sort of a strategic coordination and policy. And as I say, also sort of translate what's going on between IMF and World Bank to our USAID counterparts, so we can help kind of harmonize our programs, understand the larger context, and be prepared for whatever is coming up. The functions of an economist in USAID are partly internal, partly external. Internal, we want to, one, support the use and of evidence, of use of greater cost effectiveness evidence. What works? What's out there? There's so many studies. How do we kind of pull in our skills where we have sort of a comparative advantage at reading all of these little more dense papers and pulling out what applies to each development field, environment, ag, etc. And how do we apply that evidence into our project design? So that's one kind of big area internally to kind of guide our program and project design to be more cost effective and efficient and effective. So these are one big group of area of things we're looking at. We also program and run projects on economic growth in an economic growth office. And so, especially if we're doing support for a government to provide capacity training to the central bank, to the Ministry of Finance, an economist would be well positioned to be involved there. And then it's also, we work to provide sort of a larger purview on the strategic planning and understanding the kind of arc of development and where the country is on that development path. So understand the macro context and these factors that we might need to prepare for 5-10 years down the line. And so that's also advising the mission director and such. And then we also work closely with our state colleagues as well to help kind of understand what's going on in the larger country. Some of the things economists like more specifically work on would be various kinds of analyses as well as managing activities. And so they could work on a cost benefit analysis or a cost effectiveness analysis, some kind of growth diagnostics, right? Trying to find what is really holding this country back. The places we work in, you can look at it and say everything's the matter. There are problems all up and down the line, but we can help kind of systematically apply some tools to assess really where are the most binding constraints? What are the biggest bottlenecks? If those were relieved, where could we go? And that can inform our programming. These are things that we've worked on, that I've worked on. I believe Scott has worked on some of these as well. And a lot of this can kind of unlock and change our programming, right? We can look and say, well, the central bank doesn't have the monetary tools to really provide proper direction for the country. That's why inflation is high. That's why the exchange rate's mismanaged, etc. So we can then develop a program to work on capacity building or something on public financial management to help build that capacity within the country to help them better manage their resources. So I know I went through a little fast. I want to leave plenty of time for Scott and any other questions. So over to you, Scott.
Great, and thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Andrew did a great job of outlining a lot of the different roles and responsibilities of economists. And what I will say is, in many cases, there's a lot of similarities across the different technical areas in terms of project management, project design, stakeholder engagement. So really, when we're talking about some of the differences, we're talking technical focus and specialty, but the life of a foreign service officer overseas implementing and designing programs is largely similar with some sectoral differences. So saying that, I mean, certainly from the context of uh, going first about environment officers is if you're really passionate about environmental programming, environmental sciences, this is the technical specialty where we really try to infuse the sustainable development approaches across our different programs. A lot of times, what we learned from our own industrial revolution and non-sustainable polluting practices, if you don't develop in a sustainable way, there will be negative consequences to that. So trying to help work with other countries to do better, frankly, than we did during our development trajectory, to do things like better natural resource management, incorporate the cost of using natural resources into economic models, trying to ensure water security and proper sanitation across both urban and rural areas. Also trying to work on various clean energy solutions. So rather than coal or other types of energy that can create air pollution or other negative externalities, really working with local economies to try to implement hydro, solar, natural gas, other types of solutions to really help provide a critical resource to new and growing economies without some of the implications to our environment. So in this, we also, officers in this space make sure that all of our programming is in compliance with a lot of our rules and regulations associated with this. So when you're doing various projects, you need to do economic and social impact analyses, environmental analyses, and really making sure that the government structures and all of our programs and partnerships across over 100 countries that we work are really, looking at infusing those environmental practices throughout our programming. I think another, switching briefly over, and similar, not too dissimilar from some of our work, and this is largely what I've been for most of my career, is a private enterprise officer. And this is really those positions that really engage the private sector in a way that makes them part of the solution. So really working with companies big and small to try to co-develop and co-finance different programs to create jobs, to help promote trade, to implement reforms and policies that are more business friendly, that attract investment, to really link countries into the global financial capital markets so they can actually get the capital they need to build infrastructure, to build various other types of investment that all modern economies need. We work with them to help build their capacity for various government agencies and partnering on trade regulations and what we call technical or trade capacity building, which essentially helps get them to a place where they can, again, adhere to all the standards and regulations and food safety, plant safety, a range of other quality and safety metrics that are required to function and trade. Because at least in terms of USAID and certainly in a lot of our programming over the years, we believe in export-driven growth, where we're working with countries to try to find where they have a competitive advantage or at least a relative advantage, and trying to help them develop these sectors that are strategic, create a lot of jobs, attract investment, and promote exports. Your typical day, again, would be working with various private sector actors, government officials, Ministry of Trade, Ministries of Commerce, Ministries of Finance, and really working with them and partnering on in each country based on whatever their development strategies are. And in some cases, we actually help them do that as well. And I mean, it's so multifaceted and similar to what Andrew was saying earlier. there's no one type of program. In Eastern Europe, the programs are different than in Latin America, which are different than Africa, which are different than Asia, because the development context are quite different. The health and vibrant nature of the private sectors are quite different. And so the types of programs and engagement you'll have will also be different. So in rural Africa, you might be doing much more agriculture. In parts of Asia, you might be doing more high tech, IT, or other types of different programming. And, just having that broad breadth of skills and experiences is really helpful in this sector. And then finally, transitioning to the infrastructure officers, this is actually one of our maybe least appreciated technical specialties, but one of our most critical. We have over $5 billion of infrastructure projects across the globe. And really, these are, the programs like building roads. So in Ukraine, we're building roads and rail and energy infrastructure and water infrastructure. When I was in Afghanistan and then in Iraq and Pakistan, we're building trade and transport infrastructure, uh, uh, schools and health clinics, and a range of other things, all which have uh, compliance and safety issues that we really need people with engineering skill sets to really make sure we're following all the rules and regs, can actually engage in construction companies and manage projects and help with designs and understand the entire construction life cycle in order to make sure that the construction projects that we build are safe, that are value add, and will be lasting a while. Certainly, there's a lot of competition, specifically in the infrastructure space, with China and other countries that don't necessarily apply Western safety standards and regs. And so, while they might build projects all over the world, the difference between an American construction projects, which last decades, versus Chinese construction projects, which last years, can really make a difference. And so it's also working with local counterparts and helping them understand the difference between lowest cost, value for money, and quality. And, you kind of get what you pay for. And so definitely a very critical aspect of the work we do across the world. So with that, I know that was a quick run through. I just touched on a few different areas at a very high level, but I'm happy to drill down on any of those specialties. And I know Andrew will as well.
Yeah, Scott, also, let me just add one other point that I think is actually really interesting about USAID, and it concerns the private sector engagement. And so, of course, private enterprise officers play a critical role in that. But the private sector engagement is actually sort of a change in part in USAID's philosophy to really think about engaging the private sector across all backstops. So you have health officers looking, well, wait, we're looking at supply chain, cold chain, we're looking at pharmaceuticals. And so this is something every backstop, including the ones we're talking about, we'll be looking at. But of course, the private enterprise officers come in with a unique skill set to really help advance those more than anybody else. So I think it's actually a really exciting area in the agency as well. Welcome
Yeah.
questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Just maybe you made me think of something too, Andrew. Is like I think as you get older or higher in your career, especially at USAID, really just understanding, development doesn't fit in any of these technical silos. It's really integrated projects where you bring the health experts, the economic experts, the environment experts together, and you design programs that are looking at more of these problems more as systems that you have to tackle from different areas. That's really where we find the programs that are most effective. So Andrew is 100% right. There's a private sector solution, and if it's going to be sustainable, you have to make profits. You have to have the private sector there, and same as if you want it to be sustainable, you need to infuse environment practices and various other things.
Wow, thank you so much, Scott and Andrew. That was quite a lot. You all keep really busy. um, we want to open it up for questions from our attendees who are here with us. If you want to raise your hand, that would be fine. Please do. Well, they're a little quiet today. Okay, So in the meantime, until you gather your thoughts together, and because these are the experts, you want to ask as many questions. Andrew, if you have
Uh,
something else to say, please go ahead. Yeah.
we do have a couple of questions in the
It's
chat.
in the Q&A.
Yes, the
Okay.
first one here. Thank you so much for your time. Are the goals for all officers based on the needs recognized by the specific country, by the US, or a combination of both? Also, how did you know which backstop best suited your interests and your skill set? And that's to either Scott or Andrew.
Scott, do you want to take on the negotiation of positions with the embassy and government?
Mhm.
Uh, in
Correct.
terms of the backstop, like how did you? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, certainly. So, I mean, I think it's of two areas, right? I mean, so as I mentioned, USAID is part of the national security apparatus of the U.S. government. So, we as a country have foreign policy, we have goals and objectives that we set at the highest level at the White House when a new administration comes in, which govern the types of work that we do. Uh, but saying that in general, as we work in the different countries, it's very important to have local ownership and buy-in of the work we do. We can't just impose programs or just throw money and hope it'll have an impact if there's not the recognition and desire to have some of these programs. They frankly don't work, and that includes infrastructure, that includes private sector programming, that includes our democracy and governance, our health. I mean, if there's not that local ownership and buy-in, it's really hard to be successful. So really, it's both, where of course we align our approaches with national security, but clearly our national security is to have peace and stability around the world in a broad sense, and we do that by supporting the development and economic and health and educational stability of the countries which we work in.
Yeah, and if I may also maybe give a shout out to people not here, program officers. A
Mhm.
lot of this kind of donor coordination is led by program officers at Post, where they have a lot of that kind of ownership over talking to like the development coordinating people. A lot of times it's at the Ministry of Finance for all of the development assistance programs, and that's where they'll have that discussion. And we, of course, wherever we are, we fall basically under the country's own development strategy, right? We're not doing something outside of that. We're not doing something unknown to the government. We're doing it with their full approval, knowledge, etc. And that's also organized under our kind of bilateral agreements with the government. Sometimes we need state to help us out, pull in the big wigs and ambassadors to help negotiate this. But this is by and large done by neither Scott nor I. It's really a lot of this is done by program officers as well and mission directors.
Yeah, the only distinction I would make is, we are have a values driven approach to some of our policies as well. And sometimes we work in places and with governments that don't always share the same values. And so, in those cases, I mean, we respectfully disagree, but things where education of girls, LGBTQ issues, I mean, there's clearly things where we really want to promote human rights and things that we might not see eye to eye with the governments, but we definitely try to strive where we can to build that consensus and co work together to implement our program.
Thanks for mentioning the program officer backstop, because they are going to be presenting on Wednesday. So if you want to learn more, please come back to the next session on Wednesday. The second question was, here it is. Hi, thank you for your time presenting this content for us today. Can you please advise on the interaction of engineers working alongside the environmental and economic vision? What are some of the key processes that integrate the various specialties? And thank you.
You're really
Scott,
testing our. Go ahead.
let me jump in and I'll answer 1/3 of it and you got 2/3. Okay, so when I was in South Africa, we actually also had a good engineering office there and environment as well. And so we had the 3 E's. And what I would say is each one of us had some different vision of like sustainability, right? And so when we would look at like a project jointly together, like I would look at it from the economic sustainability point of view, the financial flows and such. You also had then the environmental people looking at a different notion of sustainability, as well as the engineers looking at the technical sustainability as well. And so all three of these are necessary for a project like a little like micro hydro or micro ag irrigation project. Like the engineers have to be involved to make sure it's technically feasible. You want the environment officers also making sure that long-term this isn't going to cause more damage, etc. And then in terms of any kind of payment, maintenance of the system, the economists have like our view as well. Scott?
I I think you answered it quite well. I think really no, that's the articulation. You all come at it from a different perspective. A private sector person might try to find finance from banks or other institutions to make the project viable. An economist might do some of the analysis. An environment specialist might make sure the proper environmental and social impact. I worked in a project in Kenya where we built a wind turbine project where essentially we had the environment folks doing assessments of bird migration patterns and made sure that we mitigated against bird migration and the wind turbines. We had lined up investment on the private sector side to make sure the project was viable. We worked and partnered with the government in order to have land rights and legal issues and local community buy-in and stakeholder engagement. On the engineering side, we definitely had people reviewing the projects to make sure that they're up to best practices and have the proper specifications and are safe and secure. And so all these things have to go together in some of these complex projects that we deal with. I mean, sometimes we deal with projects in the tens of thousands. Sometimes we have projects in the hundreds of millions. And so it really just depends on kind of the scope and scale of what we're doing. The only other part is, I think I'll just go back to the previous question. I realize the question was, how did we know what backstop or technical specialty we wanted to do? In all candor, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I applied to be a management officer, a program officer, a private enterprise officer, an education officer, and I got all of them. And I really went with the first one that accepted. I did have an economic background. I was a former teacher. I could do strategy and budgets and things like that. And so really it was probably kismet. But saying that, I mean, I definitely am a firm believer in the multi-sectoral approaches that we take. It really takes a village. It really takes all of us. And I wouldn't say one's better or worse than another. It's really, they're all critical. It just depends on what your unique interests are, what your background and what your skills are. I mean, certainly if you're an environment sciences person, you're probably not maybe going to be an engineer, but there doesn't mean there's not a range of areas probably with all your backgrounds that you might be qualified to do.
Thank you, Scott. Here's another question. When grants are given out to local partners in country, do economic officers do the post-project evaluation, or is there another sector that evaluates them?
I'll jump in here with a quick story. When I was at the mission in Kenya, me and some others, we just did a meta-analysis of all these evaluations, end of project evaluations of some sort, and they were also all done by the implementer. And you might be shocked to find out every one of them said this was a raging success. The only problem was it didn't have enough money or go on long enough. So USAID is now more arm's length in our evaluations. We contract out with separate third parties to do as much of an unbiased evaluation as we can. So econ officers, program officers, this is especially something run through the program office, though economists are probably more involved than some of the others because economists might be in program office and have special evaluation skills. But this is largely something run out of a program office where they will contract out for separate end of project evaluation of some sort, and that's given back to the mission. And frankly, there's many times when the mission doesn't like it. And I think that's really part of healthy growth inside of USAID, and helps us learn and evolve instead of, padding the echo chamber.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is, I mean, there's the post project evaluation, there's the midterm project evaluation, and there's constant monitoring throughout what's working, what's not. And so it's not just a one-off scenario. I mean, if you're managing the project well, hopefully if you notice an issue, you can correct it and course correct and get to better results. And so really it's a range of different interventions to try to make sure our programming is successful, though clearly not, it's not always successful, but definitely there's a lot of people working really hard to try to make sure they do the best they can.
Thank you. Another question. Thank you for your time responding to my earlier question. What are some of the key professional experiences that applicants should seek prior to applying for the Payne Fellowship program? For example, what advice do each of you have for professionals who are currently in the workforce to better prepare us as a future Foreign Service officer?
I'll jump in because I can tell Andrew's like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, certainly some of the things we talked about in terms of technical specialties. I mean, if you do have an interest in a certain technical area, you have experience in a certain technical area, you've worked with NGOs, you've worked in the private sector, you've done engineering or projects. I mean, clearly, those are very much skills and experiences we value. Certainly also, of course, you need a master's. That's one of the prerequisites, but you wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. But also, there's a lot of people who come from other parts of government who have worked with USAID for years, or some other implementing partner or development organization. So certainly, I mean, some working in some of the technical areas, overseas international experiences, I think is very helpful, because I do think one of the things that people don't always realize when they start or embark on a career in the Foreign Service is it's not just a job. It really is a lifestyle. I mean, you're like, I lived in Afghanistan for 2 years, and that's not a job. It's a lifestyle when you're in a high security environment or high crime environment, high terrorist environment. And I think people should enter this. I'm not trying to dissuade people. It's a wonderful, rewarding career. We do really amazing work, but I also think it's important people are enter the career eyes wide open and understand the implications this can have on lifestyle, on families, on partners, on children, and really all the things that you have to think about. Because you could serve in Liberia one tour, and you could serve in South Africa another tour. You can serve in Ukraine another tour. And so really those are really important considerations you should be thinking about when you're embarking on this career.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, Scott. That's an excellent answer. I could go down the road and tell you about all the other technical things like specialties and like push you on math and statistics and looking at our randomized controlled trials and development science, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason people don't succeed at USAID, or they leave, which are different things, are usually not because they don't have the technical skills. It's something else in life. They didn't want to be abroad. This career is you're primarily abroad. Family members didn't want to be abroad, or they needed schooling, medical treatment, something in the US. Some other part of their life was not compatible with it. And Scott, I'll pick on your example with Afghanistan, not to make too much light of it, but on the one hand, you have the external threats. On the other hand, you are locked in a fishbowl with 200 of your best friends, and you have to figure out how to get along, seeing the same people every day in, day out, 24/7 for a year at a time. So you could, it's like being on a submarine, right? Think about, these kind of personal skills and characteristics and traits in being able to kind of get along and thrive in a fishbowl abroad. So yeah, those are also important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference between what will make you attractive for the job and what will make you successful in your career are different
Yeah.
questions. But
Yeah.
I mean, this is a relationship business. I mean, it's a bureaucracy. There's systems, there's processes, but having good relationships with your colleagues, really appreciating and understanding their value add to the different projects, even though sometimes it could make it take longer, or you have to do a little more work. It's all true, but it's all really critical. And like the best when we're at our best is we're all really contributing, we're all really working hard, and we're all supporting each other get a better product.
Thank you, Scott and Andrew. Okay, another question. Based on your answer to the previous question regarding professional experience preparation, how do you believe you prepared yourself personally, moving your life abroad, going beyond the US, understanding the mental and social challenges that come with your work? Whoa.
Andrew, I went first last
Andrew?
time. You go first.
Okay. Um, yeah, I would say I thought I was prepared, but I probably wasn't. So I mean, having as much interaction with people with different experiences than you is important. And I know that not everybody has the chance to like join Peace Corps or go live in a village in Zambia or anything exotic like that. It's just being able to be around other people who are different than you, understand their perspective and how you can relate to them. Like, even if you're in the middle of Nebraska, whatever your deal is, like, that's something that's actually a good preparation because you're going to be dealing with this day in, day out. How do you relate to people that outwardly seem very different than you? So I thought I did that, kind of read. I had a small child at the time, so I read about, education of small children and third culture kids and stuff about that. Traveled a little bit, not as much, but one of the things that they had us do when we started orientation was write like a letter to yourself to help you understand why you are motivated to do this. And keep that in the back of your mind because there's going to be days when you don't want to do this. And so keeping some other kind of higher perspective, higher goal in place was, I think, something that certainly helped with the mental challenges and then just social challenges. I guess I would encourage people to meet as many people outside the embassy community as you can and find ways of relating to those people. But
Yeah, no, I think all excellent points, and I do think when going back a little bit to what I was saying this about a lifestyle on the social uh, uh, dynamics, it is different. You could be the only person of your gender or race around, and it could be a very uh, it could be a very unique and challenging experiences at times. You could go to countries that are blatantly racist and or don't believe in the same values and human rights perspectives that we do. And like that can be hard. Being a single woman or single man abroad and all the implications of that, meeting people, having romantic relationships. And I don't want to go too far into that, but I mean, point is it's challenging and many people have struggled. And that's been one of the reasons for people leaving the agency as well. It's just needing to figure out what works for you. And there's no right or wrong or one uh, solution that works for everyone, but really thinking through what do you want, both from your career and what you're willing to sacrifice in terms of your personal or social lives that can really make you happy and a fulfilled person in your life and career. I do think from a mental perspective, it was underappreciated and maybe probably underappreciated, underemphasized when I think Andrew and I were coming into the agency, but I do think they're doing better at really promoting mental health and because we're in challenging situations. You can be shot at, you can have high crime, high threat. There could be terrorism activity right down the road. There can be, and I don't want to go too far. It's like not likely to happen. I mean, people are safe and secure. They take good care of us, but they are high stress environments. And, and so in that context, there are mental health challenges, and, you have to be careful not to get bad habits or lean on coping mechanisms that are not healthy, and really reach out if you need help, build a support network, call your family if you need to, and just vent. I mean, there's all these types of things, but it's really important you find out what works for you. And then just the last thing, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to be candid. The last thing is really understanding your family and what they need. Like, if you're traveling with a partner and you're going to a Russian speaking country, like you got Russian training, they probably didn't. Your kids probably don't have Russian training. So, you're going to the office, you're supported, you have this whole support network, and they're at home and trying to buy a loaf of bread in Russian, and it's the hardest thing in the world, and they're frustrated and angry, and their ability to adapt. And I know it's a trivial type of example, but I've had people vent at me in their careers because of that. And so really thinking about your family, what, just because it works for you, is it going to work for them? And really thinking as you're trying to figure out where you want to go and where you're willing to serve. I mean, those are all important considerations, because if your family's not happy, you're not going to be happy. And I don't care how good you are professionally, it's just not going to be a successful experience.
Scott, I'm glad you mentioned as much as you did, because what we are seeing also is USAID is really being very sensitive and supportive of the environments that people are going into. There is the EFM, the Eligible Family Members Office, who support family members, foreign service officers. We see that there are a lot of affinity groups within USAID. And also I know with the Payne Fellowship Network, they're really like a close-knit family, and they come together and they try to support each other, because for everything that you mentioned, you need that support when you're overseas. And so at least having someone to call on. Andrew, you mentioned something really important. You said during your training that they asked you to write a letter. And so, about why you wanted to do the work that you're doing right now. And so with us in the Payne Fellowship, I have the fellows write a note. Why are you so passionate? What are you passionate about? And why are you doing what you're doing? Because I told them, you're going to meet some tsunamis are going to come to hit you, and you're going to have to go back and read that. So I'm glad to know that that's part of the exercise on board. And because you really, that passion that you have, and you could tell it clearly with Andrew and Scott, you can tell clearly that you do have a passion for the work that you're doing. And it really shows, it comes out in, how you present. Are there any more questions that we would have for Andrew and Scott? And Andrew, Scott, anything else that you'd like to share? One outstanding project that you could think about and how you got through it? Or a challenging one that you were able to get across there.
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot in my career that I think it's been pretty cool, and that I'm definitely proud of. I mean, I think one, in my early days, I maybe I'll transition. I think I'll do another one. Recently, during the around 20, I think 17, 18 timeframe, right when our agency was trying to transition to take more private sector approaches to the work that we did, similar to the comment that Andrew made earlier when he talked about an increasing recognition that if you want sustainable development, if you really want solutions that are going to endure long after our presence and our programs, you really need to involve the private sector. You need to really have financing and profits and investment in order to do anything from supply chains for medicine to infrastructure to small business development to education. And we worked more broadly, and this is the part of the job that as you develop in your career, you're not just working on one-off USAID projects. You're working on more cross whole of government types approaches, and recognizing USAID has skill sets and tools and resources, but so does State Department, so does the Department of Commerce, so does the Millennium Challenge Corporation, so does the Development Finance Corporation. And really, working together, we uh, collectively as a government across 17 different departments and agencies created a trade and investment presidential initiative for Africa, where since it was established in, I want to say, early 2019 or late 2018, we've generated tens of billions of dollars of private investment across Africa, and that's leading to uh, electrification of thousands of houses. That's leading to building of tens of thousands of homes for people across the continent, creating tens of thousands of jobs across the continent. And these are the types of impact we can have at scale. And so, really being part of that and really working not just within USAID but across the government, at the White House, attending meetings at the National Security Council, really building these strategies and approaches, and being in charge of the implementation has been really rewarding, and definitely something I'll remember long after I've retired from this career.
Well, that's nice, Scott. I'll my example will go a different direction. I was in Nepal during the big earthquake in 2015. It was 7.9. And so 3,000 or so people died, and there was hundreds of aftershocks. And so at least in those first few days, one, I was really grateful my family happened to all be in the US at the time. And in the first few days, especially, nobody was coming in. There were no flights. So we really had to kind of band together and take care of ourselves. And this is where kind of the close-knit embassy community was really important, because everybody who could just jumped in and did whatever. I worked with state doing consular stuff and helping people at the airport figure out what to do as they're just exhausted and trying to get out of this destroyed country. And then, later working with others to are the markets functioning? Is there going to be food coming back into this city? Or should we evacuate everybody? So doing some work on that as well. But the local staff mostly had to take care of their families, but for those who were still around, we had to just all kind of band together and do whatever needed to be done. And that's one of the great things about the kind of embassy community, where you get to know your coworkers at such a deep level, even before this kind of crisis. And it just really kind of showed the best of the Foreign Service, how we took care of so many Americans and others at the embassy, took care of each other. And it was just a really rewarding experience in spite of the inherent tragedy of it. Also, I know you have other people that will speak to you. Scott and I know a fair amount about some of the other backstops and positions. Happy to give a shout out for some of the frankly less glamorous ones, including contract officers.
I ask you about that. How do you work with them? Because
I'll say this, if I could compare briefly economists to contracting officers, the agency will never have an economist at every post. We have a slightly different skill set and a different need, and the agency needs contracting officers everywhere. I think of them as, in some ways, the most important people at the mission. Without them, basically all other authority to procure services and run projects is derivative of them. They're the ones with the warrant authority. We just have authority derived from them to carry out any kind of activity or program. And they're really important. They work serious hours, and the mission would not function without them. And it's kind of dawned on me over time, all the different skills they have, where they have to be kind of technical experts in whatever they're working on at that time. And so you can have a busy but flexible and rewarding career as a contracting officer. Economists are great too, but we're more niche. We have a different function, and we won't be at every mission.
Yeah, no, definitely building off what Andrew was saying. I mean, you will be on the last question. You will be you will be at the person at the party with the random stories. When someone's talking about their weekend in Baltimore, you're saying about the time you were in random middle of nowhere Philippines doing something extravagant, or there was a typhoon or an earthquake or a coup or something like that, which we all seem to, if you have a long enough career, you come across. And so definitely it's at those times where I think you see the best of us as officers, and really understand that we're all in it together. And I couldn't agree more with what Andrew said. And just I've seen it multiple times in my career, where people just, you just got to do it. You got to get it done. Everyone realizes that, and you're the support network, and you just you really bond and create great long lifetime relationships. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of I think the contracting officers, I couldn't emphasize more the importance of those positions. And it doesn't really, you don't need to necessarily be a contract specialist. I mean, some people are legal experts. I had a friend who was an agronomist, and they became a contract officer, and that's helpful, because when you approach agriculture portfolios and you actually understand some of the ins and outs, or if you're have private sector experience and you understand how contracting works, and how to provide grants and work with certain types of companies, that's all valuable experience. And so I wouldn't necessarily underestimate the importance of those. It's hard work, but really it's the nuts and bolts as a contract grant organization. What we do is foundational to what we do. We also have legal specialists who do a lot of great work in doing a legal review and making sure, yes, we're in compliance with laws and regulations, but also sometimes you're working on judicial systems and advising countries on legal reforms and how to make their court system more fair, how to enforce contracts, how to adjudicate, elections. There's all these types of things which are really interesting and fascinating. And it's also cool because, especially when you're on the legal background, I've worked with some who have created new implementing mechanisms, like new ways of doing business, and just that are innovative and have never been done before. And it just takes some courage, some technical know-how, and some maybe flexibility. And really, I mean, I think that those are also some of the most fun times I've had in my career, is doing something that we've never done before as an agency. And that's really fun. Or new applications of old tools. I mean, that's also fun. Just working with people who just know their job in and out, and really have a lot of value add, and you can really ultimately get better development outcomes and better impact on the ground by working across these types of specialties. Financial analyst, I mean, we do a lot of work with local governments, and really they do a lot of capacity work and help departments of finance run a budget for a country. Like, how do you have financial management and implement tax systems where the government generates enough revenue from trade, tariffs, and tax systems, public financial management, in order to run a government and provide education and health services and roads and infrastructure. And there's just a lot of that. We also work with local governments and try to get them to use U.S. government taxpayer dollars through our programming and implement programs through governments. And so use their own accounting systems, their own internal controls, their own staff and experts to really prioritize our donor funding to projects that they value in their communities and more broadly at a national level in whatever countries. And so there's no shortage of need. I mean, I'm here to technically recruit for private enterprise environment and engineers, but we need good officers across the board. And whatever seems to be the most appealing to you, you can't go wrong. And it really takes a team, and everyone's critical to the work we do.
Thank you so much, Scott and Andrew. Last week we had your colleagues from the support backstops, EXO, the executive officer, the contracting officer, and the finance officer. And they also, just like you, talked about how closely you all work together in the mission across backstops. So it really is a very closely knit within the mission. So it's good to know that you reconfirm that. So I will encourage all of you who are here with us tonight. The recordings are on the Payne YouTube, and this one will also be on the Payne YouTube, to please go back and listen and learn as much as you can about all of the various opportunities, the various backstops or career pathways that you can within USAID, and how much they all work so closely together. I don't know if we have any more questions. I see there's one more here. Um, if we do not qualify for the Payne Fellowship, what is the suggested route to successfully secure a position within USAID? Would that be to apply directly to USAID?
So yes, as a foreign service officer, yeah, check out the government jobs website,
USA Jobs?
USA Jobs. Everything will be posted there. Everything's above board, all the qualifications. We also usually want several years of experience in the field. Whatever the technical field is, overseas experience is great and sometimes required as well. There's other ways in. You can work for one of our implementing organizations. There's a lot of big ones based in the DC area. You can also work as on the civil service side, where you'll be based in the US, but still involved in USAID, and you can have occasional trips out of varying lengths to the field to support as well. And those are also on USA Jobs. And then there's lots of other ways of coming in.
Thank you.
And there's I think there's a congressional ceiling for the number of foreign service officers, and that's what you're talking about. I think it's like 1,980 at present, and I don't know exactly where we are in the recruitment, but we have several. I mean, we're not too far from the ceiling, and we're hiring at attrition all the time. People are retiring. We need to replace them and backfill them. So just encourage you to really keep an eye out on USA Jobs, because that's where you will find a lot of the opportunities that we've been discussing today. Certainly the Payne Fellowship, as you mentioned, is a very unique way of getting into the agency, and if you apply, I mean, highly recommend it, because it's a very unique and wonderful opportunity. I mean, it's for sure. And so to the extent you can, it's a great pathway, of course, too. And then lastly, what I don't tell, there's the civil service side, but there's also we hire a lot of short-term contractors, and we call them institutional support contractors, which will often hire staffing agencies to hire people with various technical skills to help support us. A lot in Washington for sure, but even sometimes overseas, where if you have a specific technical expertise, you might be able to qualify for some of those positions. And again, there's no promises. Every position is still posted and competitive, and you still have to go through the normal application processes. But if you're working within and for USAID as a contractor, you're going to understand the processes and systems and be more competitive when you are actually bidding on a position, because you have the experience. You've been exposed to how USAID does business. You might understand certain regions or certain types of programming or portfolios, and all that really just helps you build, your credentials as you try to ultimately apply to a position at USAID, and just makes you a more appealing candidate just with that experience under your belt.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, Scott, any last words of advice?
If I may, there was a question that briefly popped up.
Oh, there's another one. Okay.
About a foot in the door. I understand where you're going with that, and I don't want to oversell how unbiased we are. There's a lot of systems in place to really, really help open this up for all US citizens. We want to be representative of the country, want everyone who thinks they can come in, please apply. I went through a hiring process recently, read every single application that came. And we've had it where, like, sometimes people might know one of the applicants, they recuse themselves. So a foot in the door doesn't necessarily mean knowing somebody. It doesn't necessarily mean X years of international experience. That helps. But we're looking for people with technical skills and who want to do this job and want this lifestyle. So I wouldn't so much fixate too much on a foot in the door through Payne or otherwise. There's lots of ways in. And yeah, just continue to try. Sometimes it takes people more than one application to get in, but if it's something you want, don't let one little setback deter you.
Same thing we say for the Payne Fellowship program. You can apply as many times as you want to. Okay, last words of advice. Anything that you want to share, because you shared a lot, but any last minute words of advice?
Yeah, I did share a lot. No, just good luck. I think this is a wonderful career. You're going to have amazing experiences, and both for you, your families. I couldn't recommend it high enough. I mean, that's why I'm here. This is one of the parts of the job that I really enjoy. If you have any questions, I mean, you have my email address, so I'm happy to share it if people want to ask questions. And yeah, just good luck. It's a really, really wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, just to echo that, anyone's welcome to contact me, and I'll tell them whatever I can about how to get in, or what the career is like, or what the life is like, whatever people need, right? Open, public, transparent public servants here. So let us know whatever we can do to help you.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Scott, and thank you all for being with us this afternoon. We definitely want you to visit the USAID website, because you want to learn about the amazing work that our colleagues at USAID is doing all around the world. And so there are lots of videos, lots of programs and activities that you can actually see what they are doing on the ground. Also visit the Payne Fellowship website. I know that you're putting in your application, so I'm sure that you're on the website already. If you have any questions for us, Payne Fellows at howard.edu. You can just send an email to us, we'll respond. We have the last in the series, this is called Backstop Week, right? So this is last week and this week. The last session is taking place on Wednesday, and we will focus on crisis stabilization and governance, humanitarian assistance, and the program officer, three backstops that we'll be focusing on. So the webinars are all recorded. You can go back and play, and we'll be sharing them again, Andrew and Scott. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and good luck with your applications. We look forward to seeing them whenever they come in. Thank you very much. Application cycle closes October 24th. Thank you. Take care, Andrew and Scott.